up, world? Welcome back. And look, if you're looking at this timeline right now, we're going to cover, well, first we're going to start to cover a period a little before the timeline that you see on your screen. Then we're going to go until the late 1600s. We're not going to cover this entire timeline right now, but the entire series of the United Cap of America will be covered in this timeline eventually, with parts 4 and 5 to come next. If you've watched part 1 and 2, part 1 being All Roads Lead to Rome, and then part 2 being the Lex Mercatoria or the Law Merchant, this is part 3 called the Doctrine of Destruction. And this is going to cover the doctrine of discovery and the implications that it had in Western civilization's colonization by the European powers and the Roman Catholic Church. So we're going to jump into it. I hope you're taking notes. And I hope you've also been able to access the What's the Word playlist on the G-Bound Republic TV channel. Let's get it.
Pay attention. The doctrine of discovery is a policy enacted initially by the 15th century Catholic Church, proclaiming the right of Christian nations to take possession of the lands of non-Christians in the interest of saving their souls. Non-Christians were not recognized as legitimate landowners, and any lands discovered by Christian explorers were claimed as the property of the discoverer's nation. The doctrine of discovery is articulated, first, by a papal bull issued in 1452, another in 1455, and the best known in 1493, shortly after the 1492 expedition of Christopher Columbus and his discovery of the so-called New World. The 1493 papal bull made clear the duty of Christian explorers to seize the lands of non-Christians for the purpose of Christianizing the inhabitants and bringing them within the folds of European Christian civilization.
The doctrine of discovery authorized colonial powers to seize lands and subjugate people in the New World, which is actually the Old World, which is here in North America and Africa. The document justified wars, forced resettlements. It justified the disease and the conquest of the American Indian people. It didn't really justify it, but it justified it to the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the doctrine is a legal and a religious concept that justifies the colonization of non-European lands by European nations. It developed in the 15th and 16th centuries and is still used today to inform legal decisions regarding American Indian lands. The doctrine states that European nations could claim sovereignty over new lands if they were uninhabited by Christians or were inhabited by people Europeans considered uncivilized or savages. It was used to justify dispossession of indigenous nations, the imposition of Christianity, and the exploitation of resources. It was set out in a series of papal bulls or formal statements from the Pope. It is still an important legal concept in the United States and Canada to this day. It is being used to justify and excuse violence against the indigenous peoples and the dispossession of their land. The American Indian Law Alliance is committed to combating the doctrine at the time, and as we, the tribal people, still and continue to come together, maybe we can get this doctrine rescinded completely instead of just repudiated.
The idea of Europe bringing civilization to the Americas simply flips truth on its head. This is what European explorers actually found in North America.
Far and away the most beautiful city on Earth. 5 times the size of London or Rome. Great towers and buildings rising from the water. 60,000 gleaming houses, and how spacious and how well built they were. The many streets and boulevards of the city were so neat and well swept, despite the multitude of inhabitants. Crisscrossed with a complex network of canals, like an enormous Venice, but also remarkable floating gardens that reminded of nowhere else on Earth.
While Europe was drinking water from its polluted city rivers, huge aqueducts transported America's water from fresh springs.
As well as greengrocer streets, where one could buy every sort of vegetable, fruits, honeys, nut paste and chocolates. Astonished by the personal cleanliness and hygiene of the colorfully dressed populace, and by their extravagant use of soaps, deodorants, and breath sweeteners.
The doctrine of discovery was preceded by a papal bull called Unum Sanctum that was issued by Pope Boniface VIII on the 18th of November of 1302. It laid down dogmatic propositions on the unity of the Catholic Church, the necessity of the belonging to it for eternal salvation, the position of the Pope as the supreme head of the Church, and the duty thence arising of submission to the Pope in order to belong to the Church and thus attain salvation. Unum Sanctum Bull was the definitive statement of the late medieval theory of hierarchy, which argued for the temporal as well as the spiritual supremacy of the Pope. Now, this period was preceded by a long history of wars that occurred in Europe between France and England, also occurring in Spain and Portugal as well. The first war that we're going to look at in this time period is the 100 Years' War, which was happening in Europe, and it included, like I said before, England and France. The long-running conflict between England and France significantly shaped the political landscape of Western Europe with the major battles like Crécy and Agincourt. The Doctrine of Discovery authorized colonial powers to seize lands and subjugate people in the New World, which is actually the Old World, which is here in North America and Africa. The document justified wars, forced resettlements. It justified the disease and the conquest of the American Indian people. It didn't really justify it, but it justified it to the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the doctrine is a legal and a religious concept that justifies the colonization of non-European lands by European nations. It developed in the 15th and 16th centuries and is still used today to inform legal decisions regarding American Indian lands. The doctrine states that European nations could claim sovereignty over new lands if they were uninhabited by Christians or were inhabited by people Europeans considered uncivilized or savages. It was used to justify dispossession of indigenous nations, the imposition of Christianity, and the exploitation of resources. It was set out in a series of papal bulls or formal statements from the Pope. It is still an important legal concept in the United States and Canada to this day. It is being used to justify and excuse violence against the indigenous peoples and the dispossession of their land. The American Indian Law Alliance is committed to combating the doctrine at the time, and as we, the tribal people, still and continue to come together, maybe we can get this doctrine rescinded completely instead of just repudiate it.
A Donald Trump presidency, we will finally evict all of these illegal aliens that are coming here and stealing jobs from Americans. If you break into my house, should I just accept you because you washed my dishes and made my beds? I say no. I say you need to go back and come back in the right way.
So is that what the Indians should have told white Americans?
Absolutely. Ask Cochise if border control is important.
Because the original illegal alien are European white folk in America.
Agreed.
And so should the Indians stand up today and say deport all white folks back to Europe?
Well, should we learn something from their mistake? Because we are here now.
Or should you learn something from their compassion to give other people an opportunity like was given to you and your ancestors? Learn from their compassion. That's what you should learn from.
I say learn from their mistakes. Ask Geronimo if taking care of your borders is important. We need to do that now.
And I agree with Cochise, Geronimo, and Sitting Bull. Letting in the white man was the worst mistake that the Indians ever could have made. I agree with you. That was one of the greatest mistakes. Even right there in South Africa, they got a similar problem.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean the birth of the United States nation was propelled by the mass evacuation of prisons in the following countries? What do you mean? What do you mean? The transatlantic transportation of white slaves to the Americas began as early as the Pinta. Ironically, actually that part, let me stop. No, I'm not going to stop there. Let's finish that one. Ironically, the criminal justice systems in Europe were used to provide labor to the first adventurers to the new land. That makes my heart happy. What do you mean when this nation was built by criminals? I love this. So as a felon, what? Where was this in the American history class I took in school? Like, what?
Pre-Columbian Indian nations were characterized by diverse political structures, communal land ownership, and spiritual beliefs tied to nature. Every nation existed as its own sovereign nation with their own form of governance and law. Different tribes had their own systems. Some had chiefs and some had consensus decision-making like the Iroquois Confederacy. And speaking on the Iroquois Confederacy, when you see the what we know as the rebel flag now, that was originally the flag of the Iroquois Confederacy. And when the immigrants came to fight in the Indian wars that were going on this continent at that time, those European nations joined one side or the other. So whoever was fighting with the Iroquois Confederacy fought under that flag and took sub ownership of that flag that they were flying at the time of the war. Communal land ownership broke down to land that was generally considered communal property, with individuals and families having access to resources based on their needs rather than individual private ownership. And then the spiritual beliefs were in tune with the laws of nature as well. If you go and do the research on the ancient American history, you'll see that this is the old world in the land of Judah. The Paleo-Hebrew text that could be found on the Decalogue stones in Newark, Ohio, and Los Lunas, Ohio, gives historical context of how far back the Paleo-Hebrew text and then the language, carried on here, as opposed to thinking that everything was established in Africa. Everything under the Bible was established in Africa. It was actually, what you would call like a bastardization of history, because everything actually started here in the true old world. These tribes developed unique survival skills based on their geographic locations, including hunting, fishing, farming, and things of that nature. The arrival of the Europeans and the Doctrine of Discovery significantly disrupted the traditional ways of life for the American Indians, leading to displacement, loss of land, and cultural disruption. The Doctrine of Discovery relied on the false concept of terra nullius, which means empty land, claiming that Europeans could claim land inhabited by indigenous peoples simply because they, quote, discovered it, end quote, even though American Indians were already living there.
Americans are the true American Indians. It's amazing how people believe the fabricated stories. Look at the murals in Mexico or the historical accounts of the Virginia Indians. All of the state encyclopedias describe who they were. It's obvious. I'll leave you.
There were 3 papal bulls that were issued that led up to the Doctrine of Discovery. The first papal bull, I won't say the first, but one of the 3 most important papal bulls was called Dum Diversas. That was issued by Pope Nicholas V in 1452. And it authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to enslave the Saracens, or the Muslims, and the pagans, and any other non-believers. The second most important papal bull that led up to the Doctrine of Discovery was the papal bull of 1455 called the Romanus Pontifex. That was issued by Pope Nicholas V in 1455 and extended dominion over discovered lands to Catholic nations in Europe. Now, this was the papal bull that was also important to subjecting people to the Gregorian calendar. So if you were a character in that Gregorian timeline, then you were subject to the Romanus Pontifex, which was, tied to that afterbirth placenta material after giving birth. So all of this goes back to these times and all of these papal bulls that were issued during this time period. Now, the third papal bull, issued in 1493, is called the Inter Caetera. That was issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493 and established the law of nations. The Law of Nations is what we know now as the Uniform Commercial Code. And it granted lands to King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabel I of Castile. Now, during this Inter Caetera Papal Bull, there were several other things that were going on during that time period. The Moors had been expelled from Spain and Portugal, and there were wars going on in England and in France that had led up to, the Moors and any other non-believers being expelled from that area. The Papal Bull Inter Caetera, issued by Pope Alexander VI on May 4th, 1493, played a central role in the Spanish conquest of the New World, or the Old World. We're going to dodge the hijack on that. The document supported Spain's strategy to ensure its exclusive right to the lands discovered by Columbus the previous year. It established a demarcation line 100 leagues west of the Azores and Cape Verde Islands and assigned Spain the exclusive right to acquire territorial possessions and to trade in all lands west of that line. All other nations were forbidden to approach the lands west of the line without special license from the rulers of Spain. And this effectively gave Spain a monopoly on the lands of the Old World, or North America. The bull also stated that any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be, quote, discovered, end quote, claimed and exploited by Christian rulers, and declared that the Catholic faith in the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of the souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. The doctrine became the basis of all European claims in the Americas, as well as the foundation for the United States Western expansion. A lot of people, aren't aware and don't know that the United States did not originate here in America. And this was, the beginning or the birth of that Western expansion. In the U.S. Supreme Court case in 1823, case Johnson versus McIntosh, Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion in a unanimous decision held that the principle of discovery gave European nations an absolute right to the New World lands, which we know as the Old World, which is North America, Central South America. In essence, American Indians only had a right of occupancy which could be abolished. So it was a huge land grab scheme, and what you could call adverse possession. So, anyone that has a problem with adverse possession, and then, you can go back to your European nation, and if you have a problem with it, because that's how your nation and your government was established here.
Indigenous black people have been in the Americas for thousands of years before slavery and Christopher Columbus. In Columbus's own diary, his son Ferdinand Columbus confirmed that his father did in fact meet black tribes upon reaching the New World. Explorers like Giovanni Verrazzano, when he got to the Carolinas, he met the Cape Fear Indians, who he said resembled the Ethiopians of Africa. Explorers like Hernando de Soto, when he got to Florida in 1512, he started warring with the Florida Indians, who he described as big, black, and had woolly hair. Also, in the book called Primitive Black Nations of America, Constantine Rafinus points out that the black Indians met the Spaniards in Louisiana in 1543. We've always been here. We are the indigenous people.
Hey guys, I'm live at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I'm taking a video. I'm showing you guys the Powhatan. Alright, the Powhatan, as you guys know, is Pocahontas' father. So if you've ever seen the movie Pocahontas, obviously, this is what her father looked like. So as you can already tell, if her father looked like this, Pocahontas looked more like, like me, people who look like us, people who are called African Americans today. So you can see his skin color is brown. Okay, you can see his hair. All right, so now you can gauge how Pocahontas probably looked. All right, this is the Powhatan, this is Pocahontas' father. So when they show you a depiction of who Native Americans are, you guys need to understand that the Native Americans, obviously a misnomer, the Aboriginal Americans look like this. So this is a chief. All right, this is Chief Powhatan. You can see his clothes. See, he wears leaves and feathers. See his clothes, so that people don't think we're misappropriating any culture. This is how we dressed. All right. Is the tobacco store figure. All right. Today he would obviously be called an African American or a black guy. Okay, but he's not. He's an Indian or an Aboriginal American, indigenous to the Americas. And this is how, when Christopher Columbus came to America, this is who he saw. All right. This is definitely what he saw. The quote-unquote Native Americans that you guys are familiar with today, this is also who they saw when they came to the Americas. All right. So you guys can already tell. You can see how Pocahontas is depicted now. Obviously, that's wrong because this is our father. So this is how he looked. All right. You guys can start looking up the Pickaninny tribe. All right, I think that's quoted maybe in Peter Pan or something like that. The Pickaninny is a derogatory term for a black or Aboriginal child. All right, you can see how he looked, not misappropriating anything by wearing feathers. You can see the feathers in his hair. You can see how his hair looked. Like I said, he would be considered an African American today. All right, but this is a chief. All right, you can only be a chief if you have your own nation on your own land. All right, so I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Look, let me show y'all this. This is in Frederick Douglass' own paper, okay? Do you see at the top? This is in his own paper, okay? And I asked some people about this. They didn't even know about this. I said this is a colonization scheme, okay? Because we already know about Liberia and all of that. We understand that, right? So Frederick Douglass' own paper, ladies and gentlemen, he said in his own paper, watch, I ain't making this up. You see that? The colonization scheme. What does it say, y'all? There is no sentiment more universally entertained nor more firmly held by the free colored people of the United States than that this is their own, their native land. Their native land. Did he say that? Those are his words in his own paper. And that here, for good or for evil, their destiny is to be wrought out. We're gonna finish reading because they thought I was gonna stop right there. And no, we're gonna finish reading the whole thing. Watch. He said, identified with the entire history of the American people, going back more than 200 years, more than 200 years, this sentiment is natural and praiseworthy. There is not now, there never has been, and we think there never will be any general desire on the part of our people to immigrate, with an E, immigrate from this land to any other, at least of all the wilds of Africa. You see that? Frederick Douglass said, listen, we're not going to no Africa, bro. This is our native land right here. That's what he's saying. That is what he said out his own mouth. This is my land right here in America. We're not going to no Africa. This is what the whole American colonization society was about. And I know y'all hear that all the time, and we talk about this stuff all the time, but that's what it was about. So when Frederick Douglass said that, he said, no, I don't think we ever gonna wanna go to no wilds of Africa, bro. This is our native land right here. He knew that. You can even look up Frederick Douglass' lineage. He was Indian. That's why it's funny to me when you got people like Umar saying you related to Frederick Douglass because he was Indian. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. Just go to Google, type in Frederick Douglass Native American, and it's gonna pop up. Do not take my word for anything I say, okay? You can look all this stuff, look it up yourself. So don't make it seem like we just on here just lying and they're just making this stuff up. And come on, man, get out your feelings. Listen, this is our time to rediscover our roots. People who may not have known. Of course, we heard this stuff when we were kids, but now we can actually put it on screen and we can research it and we can, you know what I'm saying? We can do all that now. So now you can't just tell us anything no more. So don't expect us to fall for all these slaves was brought from Africa. I'm not saying nobody was brought from Africa, by the way. I'm not saying the slave trade is fake and it didn't happen. What I'm saying is the story that y'all are telling us about all these slaves that was brought from Africa, all these slaves, that story is very questionable. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm saying.
All right, now in conclusion, I hope y'all enjoyed this presentation. Hope you're able to take some really great notes. Now, I suggest you watch this video 5 to 10 times, get a firm understanding of what's being said, what's being told here. I think it's clear as day what it is. I'll be leaving some extra added information in the description area where you can research some of these things for yourself. But be looking out for part 4 of this series. Part 4 will be called War for Sale, and I'll be looking to get that up here in about 2 weeks. So y'all subscribe, share this out to everybody you know. Stay tuned for more, and y'all be the best.